Right, really quickly, for the people that are on the call, I apologize. Last week we didn't have the sound right. Can someone just confirm or talk into the mic to confirm that we can hear you on our end, please?
You got it.
Hello.
I can hear you, Sarah.
Okay.
Miss Bennett can hear you.
All right, perfect.
I can hear you.
So I just barely heard that.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started really quick before we do jump into the rules. I did get some clarification from the USGA on the 80-question test, and they did say that you can only take it once per year. So before I was under the impression that you could only take it once for score, but take it as many times as you want after the fact. That's not the case. So it's the new year, so it shouldn't affect anyone, but you'll only be able to take it once, regardless of, for score or not. And the reason they said was that the test is the same, and they just don't want people, I don't know. I mean, they said that we weren't the only association to request that, but in this pilot year that they're doing this for associations to run it, they just wanted to have it this way. So it is what it is. Sometimes you just gotta do what they say. Yes.
Let's say we take the 100-question exam then?
Correct. Yeah. So you could take, yeah. So and it goes per season too. So anyone that took it in December, your slate is clear for 2019. So you can take the 80 question again in 2019 here, and then take the 100 question at the rules when it's separate. Yes. All right. So really quickly, I don't think that we went through this before. If we did, someone tell me and stop. But I just really want to just a quick overview of the changes and just a few areas of focus that they've really spent in this process. So the process itself started in 2012. So it's not something they've been working on for the last year or two. It's something they've been working on for years, them being the USGA and RNA. So really, although this timeline says it starts in 2017, it really started in 2012. And when they did finally release the rules, as we all know, that in March, we had that 6-month period where they solicited feedback from associations, golfers, clubs about the changes. Some of the things that they initially put out, Tom was talking about earlier, and Jim was about the drop. It was supposed to be originally going to be just any height, just above the ground, and then I got moved to knee height. And then likewise, the distances, they were 20 and 80 inches, and now they're club lengths. So that was part of this process they went through in that initial 6 months. And they put it out again. Then they got together with their groups. And then in March to us. And then now we're going through education, obviously at the tail end of the fall, but also now, and people are playing by these new rules here and other countries as well. So a couple areas of focus. Really, they tried to simplify the rules, and a big caveat to this is that the rules of golf aren't simple. Even though they went from 34 to 24 rules, and they've come up with things to try to make it easier for golfers to understand, like the players edition of the rules. We also have to understand that golf is unlike any other sport, because in basketball, soccer, or whatever, the field or the court is the same length regardless of where you're playing, and maybe there's slight differences in how it's marked in other countries versus here, but the field itself is the same. Whereas golf, every course is different obstacles, different grasses, so there has to be a complicated set of rules to allow for that. And then another area that they tried to focus on is modernizing the rules. So the app that you have now is a lot different than what it was before, where people are going to be able to search for different situations that come up on the course. The average golfer, for us, it's just another resource to have. But for the average golfer, they don't need to know what rule or what rule 17 is, or if it's penalty areas, they can just type in penalty area and that will come up. They don't have to spend time trying to find it. And then the training resources they have available. There's a lot of videos now that are kind of geared more towards how the technology that we have available is evolving, and it could work its way into a lot of other different resources in terms of assessments and things like that. And a couple of the things that they've put out, one to the colleges and one to the high schools. I haven't seen the high school one yet, but to the colleges, they have a 45-minute quiz or assessment that they go through. And so at one of the schools I was at on Friday last week, they had a couple of the players took it and they are asking questions about it. But basically, it was kind of like the what's the education platform the USGA had, USGA University. It kind of looked like that in a sense. It was an upgraded version of that, but basically it was a more interactive quiz essentially. But they're starting to develop those resources for the average golfer, and then hopefully for us at this level for a rules official type person as well. Pace of play is a big one. You'll see that in a lot of different rules. So whether it's the flag stick, the time to search for balls, all that is geared towards pace of play. That's a big focus. And then a couple of the default options is just a reality or just an understanding of how the rules, how golf is now played. 35 years ago, whenever they originally wrote the rules, rangefinders weren't, I mean, they were probably there, but not for golf. They were probably using them in the Army or whatever. But now rangefinder is just another piece of equipment that every serious golfer buys. And then same thing with the embedded ball rule. Almost every tournament known to, that was being played at the highest level had that local rule in place. And so now they're just saying, instead of having to put the local rule, it's just going to be a rule of golf, and if you want to restrict it to closely known areas, you can do so by putting in a local rule. So they're just kind of flipping it to make it easier for people running tournaments and to understand the reality of how golf is actually being played. All right, so really quickly, I just don't want to spend a ton of time because you have a lot of stuff to go through, and there's no chance we're going to get through all of it. Anyways, a couple of changes. Casual water is now temporary water. Water hazards are now penalty areas. We're not doing the pizza jar, although I still think that's a really good idea. But and that one wouldn't count for the pizza jar if we were doing it. Nearest point of relief is now nearest point of complete relief. So this is just a simple clarification on that. Hey, we're just reinforcing that we are taking complete relief. And then through the green is now a general area. For those of you that were at the Mark Wilson seminar, one of the things I believe that he was talking about with this one was that the main reason behind this change was a translation issue, specifically around the translation in Mandarin and Cantonese around the word green and how it had different meanings in different scenarios. And so area is an easier word to translate. And so some of these changes are simply because of that, and they wanted to make the rules for everyone, and making it easier to translate with more general terms was a way for them to do that. Outside agency is now outside influence. Just further clarification on normal ground conditions and normal course conditions. Nothing really major in terms of that terminology change. This one is a funny one. I always like bringing up, but burrowing animal hole is now just an animal hole. So we don't need to know what the heck a burrowing animal is or consult someone that knows that. Environmentally sensitive area is now a no play zone. So it's really straightforward. I mean, if you don't know what a no play zone is, if you can't figure that out, then probably maybe I'm not going to make any comments, but integral part of the course is now just an integral object. Most of these were fences or rocks or rock walls, and they were part of the course, but they weren't really course, so they're more objects. So just clarification. I think this one was a translation one as well, and then you'll see this as well. And then I know when I'm typing up the presentations, my spell correct or my spelling check or whatever it is doesn't recognize some of these, but you can see that now because it's written for the English-speaking world, we have honor and practice spelled differently in certain situations. So
Have that ease at the end, like color and stuff like that.
Yeah, discolored, and yeah. So for the folks in Canada and Australia and Britain, that's just the way that they spell it. And so, but that's just, again, because the rules are written for everyone. And just that's the way that more people spell that. All right. So rule one. So each in each rule now in your book, there's a purpose statement, or purpose of the rule is what it's called. So it's a nice kind of intro into the overall concept of what the rule is trying to get at. And so, you know, it really allows us as officials, but also players, to be able to look and see, okay, I'm not sure if this is the right rule, where I want to look to see the information I'm trying to find, but that first section is going to tell you or hint at what's going to be covered going forward. And so it's a really, these are, some of them are close to logic statements. They're not quite, but it's a good thing to understand and go through. So I'm not going to read everything, but basically for rule one, these principles that have always applied are going to continue to apply is that you need to play the course as you find it and play your ball as it lies. Those are the two principles that Tufts came up with when they rewrote the rules in the 60s, or when they first had an actual codified rules across the USGA and the RNA. And then they talk about this spirit of the game, and that you'll see that you'll see that throughout as well. But that's basically just another etiquette situation where you're really just, that's just another way to say etiquette, and that we want people to play the game the quote unquote right way, whatever that is. And I think that's something that is evolving, but I mean, I think the majority of us understand what proper etiquette is, and that's really what that is trying to entail. And then again, is that you have to know the rules, and you're responsible for knowing the rules and applying penalties as needed. All right, so the game of golf, so 1.1. So golf is played in a round of 18 or fewer holes on a course by striking a ball with a club. So this is a change from the definition of a stipulated round, which was 18 holes, and or noted with noted being less, but it had to be clarified. This is just saying that it can be 18, it can be 9, it could be 12. It can be anything, and the committee doesn't necessarily need to define what the stipulated round is, or what the old stipulated round is. But again, I mean, we all know this. Each hole starts with a stroke from the teeing area and ends when the ball is holed on the putting green. And then we'll go through what these definitions are, because there's a slight change in a couple of these definitions. And again, you just, going back to those principles, you're going to play the course as you find it and play your ball as it lies. But as we know, there's exceptions to everything pretty much in this game. So you'll see a lot of exception statements or but in the rule book.
There's 180 pages of them.
Yeah, exactly. And there's one in the rules we'll go over today that has an exception, and then an exception to the exception. It's like, geez, like, but again, it's just kind of one of those things where we try to make it simple, but it doesn't always work out to be that way. And this is just saying, again, that there's going to be times where you don't want to play it from the cart path. You'd rather take relief, and you don't want to damage your club, and there's just going to be a rule to allow you to do that. So the definition of a stroke. So it's still the forward movement of the club, but it changes a little bit after that. So made to strike the ball. So you can see at the bottom there, I think Dan Kunert mentioned this last week, or someone did here, that intent is now removed from the definition. So what does that really change what the definition of the stroke is? I don't think so, but the word intent is not in there, and so I think that is intentional, that it's not in there. But anyways, you have the same situations here, where if you decide during your downswing that you're going to stop, you can do that, or you can intentionally miss the ball, and that's not a stroke. And then again, this is just saying that at the bottom, the last thing is just saying that the strokes include not only the strokes that you hit, but also penalty strokes as well. So we got a couple of videos here, because the rest of the presentation is going to be pretty boring.
Thanks for the warning.
So Kyle, a whip is still a stroke, right?
Yes.
I
Yes.
can see a lot of ladies saying.
I didn't mean to hit that.
I didn't mean to hit that.
Right.
I had no intent of hitting that.
Right.
As it turns out.
I just wanted to see if I could get close.
Right. Yeah, it's still going to be a stroke. So here's I mean, Tiger is, hopefully this will work. Tiger's famous for this.
Is that a wooden club?
Long ago.
So I mean, obviously he
Well,
stopped
that's
well
that first
before, and
How about Kevin
unfortunately
Na?
the audio is
No
not
wonder he's got
working
back problems.
on our end. But when the audio is working, it's actually a pretty funny video because I think Costas just goes crazy about how it's incredible that he does that, and he just this 30-second tirade about or just praise of Tiger and how it's such an amazing feat of strength. But again, like you said, Lee, multiple back surgeries later.
Really?
We're gonna have to wait for this to play out. Huh? Jeez, technology. What are you gonna do with it? All right, here we go. And then here's another example where the player swings over the ball intentionally. So at some point in his swing, he decided that he wasn't going to hit it. He just backs off and then he plays again. So both of those would be situations where that's not a stroke. Obviously, the one where Tiger stopped, I mean, that's pretty clear. But the other Kevin Na situation is something that you'll probably only see at the highest level. I mean, if I was ever to whiff a ball and I really, really cared about my stroke, I would say, oh, I didn't mean to hit it. But I would never say that, right? I mean, it really, I mean, you can see if you watch the video again, I mean, he clearly goes over it. And I mean, especially for a golfer his skill level, I mean, there's really no issue there.
So you mean his level is less questionable than yours?
Right, exactly, yeah. Like if I whiffed it, I'd be like, oh, that's definitely, But it's always one of those things, especially if you're working in certain tournaments, maybe like a lower level junior tournament or high school event. You just kind of have to say, did they really mean to? Because sometimes players just get up there and they take a practice swing like they're going to hit the real shot, and it really is a practice swing. They don't know like to swing lighter, and you have to ask the player, did you actually try to hit that? Right, without a smile.
Yeah.
And then the definition of hold here. So when a ball is at rest in the hole after a stroke and the entire ball is below the surface of the putting green, and when the rules refer to holing out or hole out, it means when the player's ball is holed. And then for the special case of a ball resting against a flagstick in the hole, see Rule 13.2c, and ball is treated as hold if any part of the ball is below the surface of the putting green. So this is a change because previously it had to be below the level of the lip of the hole, whereas now it just needs to be below the ground. And then you have that situation there where the ball is resting against a flagstick. That's a little. I mean, the old rules, to my knowledge, if I remember correctly, and again, I'm not good with flagstick, but I believe that in that situation you're able to straighten it out, and then if the ball fell down, it was hold, and if it wasn't, then you place it on the lip. So in this case, it's just saying that ball is always going to be hold now. Okay. All right. So player conduct, and we're not going to spend a ton of time going through this because we did talk about it briefly last week. But again, we see this word again, spirit of the game, come up. It's something that is going to be referenced throughout, but especially in this rule here, Rule 1, 1-2, 1-3. And then again, it's just acting with integrity, et cetera, showing consideration to others. So, not moving while people are hitting, all things that we would just consider general etiquette for normal golf that we play. And then obviously taking care of the course, so replacing divots, putting or fixing ball marks, raking bunkers, all these types of things are just what we consider etiquette. And again, really what they're doing is they're just laying the groundwork for committees to come up with a code of conduct to be able to enforce these types of things, which the GAM is working on as well. Maybe not to the extent that if you don't rake a bunker, we're going to penalize you, but that is under the realm of possibility, the way that they have the rules written out. And then here's one of our other exceptions again, is that if we do have a situation that is escalated or is really a serious misconduct, as you can see in the rule there, then we can actually disqualify the player. And this is no change from what was previously in play under the older rules. And then again, this is just saying that we can't go below disqualification unless there's that code of conduct that's put in as a local rule. So, which we're working towards having, and we'll have the penalty structure in that laid out for everyone, so everyone knows what that penalty structure is. And this is just saying, again, if you want to put your own code of conduct in there, you can as a local rule, and you can have one-stroke penalties, the general penalties, or you can go straight to disqualification. And then for anyone, we talked about this last week, but again, it's page 415 in the committee procedures book. If do the tabs, do they have a committee procedures tab? Okay, I would say if not, you need to have a tab for that if you're tabbing your book, because that you'll reference that quite a bit, or at least, I mean, we will running the events, but even just for officiating as well. All right, so the rules, when the book refers to rules, it's just talking about the rules 1 to 24 in the book and the definitions, as well as any local rules that the committee adopts for the competition or the course. And then players are also responsible for complying with the terms of competition. So those are just the entry requirements. If we put a handicap limit on an event, so like for the Michigan Am, it's 5.4 or less. Those are the terms of competition that are set by the committee, being the GAM or the rules committee at the club or whoever is organizing the tournament. And then here again is a section in the committee procedures book that really lays out how to set up these entry requirements, or things that most associations take for granted. But again, I think we mentioned this last week, but the committee procedures, a lot of what is in there was a combination of what was in the appendixes in the old decisions book and what was in the How to Conduct a Competition book that the USGA published separate. And so it's really just a marriage of those two documents into a place where they're easily referenced. And now, since it's in the same book, I'm sure more people will reference these sections, because the other book was hard to get your hands on, because they didn't really. You had to go to some obscure USGA website to purchase it. All right, so players' responsibility for applying the rules. So again, the players are expected to know the rules and apply the penalties when they are breached. And if a player knows that he or she, hold on a second, let me make sure all these. Okay. So we're going to get to the question about the no play zone, and there's a just trying to answer some questions that come in, but we're going to get to that, and there's really just an easy way to define where you must or may take relief. So we'll get to that in a second, Mark. So again, players. If the player knows that he or she has breached a rule that involves a penalty and deliberately fails to apply the penalty, the player is disqualified. All right, so but the key word there is knows. If they don't know, then we have a different situation. And then again, we have the same thing that we have today, where if people deliberately agree to ignore rules, if they say, "Hey, we're not going to play penalty areas as a one-stroke penalty. We're just going to have it be free relief," they can't agree to that. Both players would be disqualified in that case, or in the case of a match, they'd both be disqualified whether stroke play or match play, if they were to agree to that. And then it says here, even if they have not acted on the agreement. So even if they say it and they say it on the first tee and they hit a tee shot, then they're both DQ'd. But if they say it before and then someone says, "Hey, you can't do that," it's okay because they haven't started their round.
Kyle, how about in match play if they decide, or if they talk about on the first tee, let's just play ready golf? Is that a DQ?
No, so that's one of the changes that is in the new rules, is that they can do that now in match play. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, and then again, you can always consult an official, or you can continue to play two balls if you're not sure. But the player needs to consider not only their own knowledge, but also other information that's reasonably available. So when we're trying to make a ruling on the course, we're gonna, if there's spectators there, we're gonna consult with those spectators and say, "Did you see what happened?" to get that other source to try to find the answer to the question. And so this is just saying that they can't just ignore someone else's view or position on something that may have happened. And then this is just saying that for match play and stroke play, you can always ask for help, but it needs to be done in a reasonable time, so you can't delay play. And then you see here this Rule 20-1 that talks about when players need help. I think one of the injustices of the new rules, is personal opinion, but before in stroke play, if you played two balls, it was Rule 3-3. And I think a lot of people actually remembered that rule, whereas now it's like 21.1C3, which no one is going to remember. So I wish they would have made it simple for people to remember again, because I think that's something that I know we always told people on the first tee, or it was in the starter's notes. We tell high school kids at their rules clinics, and now it's an obscure thing. But I mean, they can always call it two balls. I get that, but it just would have been nice if they would have tried somehow to make it easier to remember. All right, and then this reasonable judgment. So this was actually put in place towards the tail end of, I think, 2017, maybe 2018. But this is the Lexi Thompson rule, essentially, is that there's going to be times where that the player is required to determine a spot, a point, a line, an area, or another location. And so it could be estimating where the ball last crossed the edge of the penalty area, estimating or measuring when dropping or placing ball and taking relief, or replacing a ball in its original spot. So all these times we're going to have to estimate or use reasonable judgment to determine where that is. And this is just this now rule of golf that wasn't added as, I think it was added in 2017 at the end of the year as a decision. Now it's in the rules. It's just saying that the determination needs to be made quick, but because it needs to be made quicker rather than later, we might not always be 100% correct. But if the player does what can be reasonably expected under the circumstances to make an accurate determination, the player's reasonable judgment will be accepted, even if after the stroke is made, the determination is shown to be wrong by video evidence or other information. So this is textbook exactly what happened to Lexi, is that she put the ball back, or that's what I think, that she tried to put the ball back in the right spot, and it was obviously shown later that it wasn't the exact spot, and so she got dinged because she didn't play from the wrong place, and because it was after the fact, she got dinged even more. But now this is just saying that in that case there'd be no penalty, you just play on. And so this I think is a great change, and really it applies to not only that situation, but same thing with with a player estimating where they went into the penalty area. We see that a lot where you'll player, and this was in the old rules, a player takes relief from the old water hazard, lateral water hazard, takes 2 club lengths, hits the ball, and then walks up 20 yards, and they see the ball sitting in play, or they see it sit in the water, and they're like, crap, I could have. At that point, they just got to continue on with their ball. But what this is saying is that if the player becomes aware of a wrong determination before the stroke is made, it must be corrected. So if they find out before they actually hit it, or try to hit it if they whiffed it, then they're going to have to go back and fix that.
Kyle, does that apply even after the 3 minutes?
So after 3 minutes, the ball would be lost. Yes. Yeah, so you wouldn't have a situation where you would, if you found it after that, you'd correct it. Yeah. Once, and it'd be the same thing. As soon as you play it. So it could be taking your 2 club lengths relief and then hitting it, or it could be going back to where you last played from and hit it. As soon as that happens, then
So 15 seconds after the 3 minutes, he sees his ball someplace else, he can't play it, it's a lost ball.
right. Yep.
But, and when you're making the judgment, I, as a player, say, this is where my ball went out, fans, whatever. I make that judgment. What about the playing partner says, oh, no, I think it went here? Who's?
Right. I mean, in that case, it's going to be the player. But, that would be a situation where if there were other people there that you would kind of consult and then say, hey, I think it was here, you think it's here. But, at the end of the day, there has to be some agreement, or I guess there doesn't have to be an agreement, but you would try to get to a consensus. And then if you can't, then the player is always able to go with what they think is best. But then if we get called out there and they say, here's what happened, and we get out there and they dropped in a place that just from just a physical, what's the word I'm looking for?
Unlikelihood.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if it's just from a physics standpoint not able to happen where they drop, then yeah, the player could be penalized in that case. But at the end of the day, it's always the player that is going to be determining what's reasonable. But you're using those other resources to confirm that. And so, I mean, I'm sure everyone in here, or a lot of people in here have gone in and told people, hey, that's not where you cross. And I know Jean has a great story about when she was officiating at the Women's Open, and Dottie asked her, how do you know where Dottie Pepper, how do you know that my ball, or that it didn't cross? And then Jean just pointed up to the blimp, because they called down to the blimp and they got the video evidence there. So there's those types of things that you're gonna look at, and we're always gonna have to make sure that it's fair for all players and not have one player get an advantage. And sometimes you just got to tell a player, like, that is just physically not possible. I mean, your ball can't make a 90-degree turn. And I told many juniors that before, and they just look in there like, and they go back and they drop, and the next hole when I'm not there, they go 20 yards forward, and it all evens out. So
Yeah, you need to be careful though, because you can't always just rely on the player. What's the number of field still on a big dog leg left? The woods cuts on the left hand side. A lot of the players like to think they've flown over the trees, and they somehow entered on the other side of that big dog leg. And the player might say, I crossed on this side of the dog leg, and if his fellow competitors are saying, no, you never, last time we saw the ball was crossing before the trees, I'm not going to allow the player to drop on the other side.
Yeah.
That'd be too big of an advantage for him to, make that case.
It's just a test of
If they
reasonableness.
disagree, you can always take your drag route.
all right, so penalties here. It said a penalty applies when a breach of a rule results from a player's own actions or the actions of his or her caddy. All right, and then a penalty also applies if another person takes an action that would breach the rules if taken by the player or the caddy, and that person does so at the request of the player or while acting with the player's authority. So if the player knows that, hey, it's a penalty if I move this loose impediment that's right behind my ball and my ball moves, but then if they say, hey, this, the person, Craig, that's playing with me, move that. If they did that, they would be subject to penalty, even though they actually didn't move the loose impediment or their caddy. And then the same thing is that if your ball's in some tall grass and your fellow competitor starts taking out some tall grass to make your shot easier, if you don't stop them in that scenario, you're also going to be subject to penalty. Okay. And then, but all these things are that you still have to know that the breach is a penalty, right? So it says that he or she knows would breach. If you're just oblivious, then you're good. And so I think that's something that we try not to tell the players, but a lot of times if they just say I don't know, then they're kind of good to go. I mean, not always, but some situations you're better off just not knowing. And I think that's one reason why the players at higher levels or tournament players don't necessarily want to get a good understanding of the rules, is because sometimes the more you know, the more dangerous it can be. And it's better off just asking people for help, even if it's, I mean, obviously at the professional level, it makes sense because they're playing for thousands of dollars, but even at the amateur level, I mean, if you're, why guess on something that you might not know for sure, instead of asking a rules official that's right there. So, yeah.
In that first bullet point, when it talks about the player's authority, does that mean that the player is actually just standing there and seeing this go happen?
Well, that's the second point.
The first bullet point under the 1.3c, I can't see the screen.
Yeah, so I think when it's referencing the player's authority, it's just saying that the player asks the person to perform something. So they say, hey, can you move that loose impediment? And then the point below is saying that if they see it happening, but they don't ask someone to do it. If they don't say stop, you can't do that, then they'd be subject to penalty. Yep. All right, and then so level penalties. I found this fairly interesting, how they describe the penalty. Maybe they've done this before in the past, I just haven't read it. But penalties are meant to cancel out any potential advantage to the player. So I thought that potential advantage was an interesting way to think about a penalty and how they came up with it. And I'd throw out to the committee that what potential advantage does a player have if they accidentally kick their ball in the fairway as opposed to the green? If that's what their definition of a penalty is, potential advantage, then they should probably apply that for more situations. But maybe that's to come. But I just thought that was interesting that that's the way they kind of, it's quote unquote a hidden definition or something like that on how to define a penalty. So you have, everyone knows this, we have one-stroke penalties, we have two-stroke penalties or the general penalty, and then we have disqualification penalty, and then for match play, a loss of hole, or the general penalty is a loss of hole in match play. Are there any two-stroke penalties in match play?
Yes.
I don't know the answer. I'm just throwing it out there.
Yes. There's at least one.
Mm-hmm.
The bunker.
Under the new rule, if you and I are in match play, your ball is in the bunker, one of your options is to come back down the line under penalty of two strokes.
Right. So take it out of the bunker.
Take it out of the bunker. Other than that, I don't know.
Right.
Formally there are like 4 situations where there are match play adjustment penalties.
It's
Now there's only
technically
one
just one.
formal penalty for match
Yeah.
play adjustment, and that's the
If the committee
excessive
Oh,
rules
into
yeah.
effect.
Right.
So now if a player has a transportation violation, that's good. There's going to be a 2-stroke penalty and no max on that. So you can have a number of match play penalties with no max applied for transportation, use of 2 caddies. There's a third one, so that was the other one.
2 carry, 2 strokes.
Clubs is a max, though. Clubs is a-
No, in match play, it's a
Clubs
match adjustment
clubs is a-
penalty.
is an
Yeah,
adjustment.
but-
That's an adjustment.
Right. So
Transportation.
we're talking match though,
Yeah,
right?
we're talking match. You asked about two-stroke penalties in match.
Yeah.
Transportation, more than one caddy. Those are.
Is it strokes or is it? I think it's just an adjustment.
More than one
Loss of
caddy is a
goal.
match adjustment, isn't it?
Those are adjustments.
We'll
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 get to those later.
yeah, we'll get to those. That'll be
They've changed the number of penalties on adjustments only.
but it's still not a loss of goal as opposed to two strokes. I mean, why wouldn't it be a loss of
Oh,
goal?
I'm sorry, you're right, it's a loss.
Yeah, right, okay. Yeah. But
But it's,
they're different.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. All right. Again, and I think this is maybe something that they've had in there before, but when they talk about disqualification, they are phrasing it as where the potential advantage is too significant for the player's score to be considered valid. So, there was a high-profile case last year over on the Korean LPGA Tour where there was a misunderstanding between what was actually defined as the green, and so some of the fringes players were not able to get the ball in hand and others were, and so they had to, I think what they ended up, did they just cancel? I forget if they just canceled the round, but it was a whole big controversy, and the head rules official resigned, and I think what happened is they ended up not counting the round.
That's true.
Is that right?
The
Yeah,
women.
Yeah.
They discounted the entire first
Right.
round.
right. But that was one of the situations there where they didn't disqualify players, but because of the issue with the ruling and how it was drastically different from one player to the next, they just said, well, we need to start over again. Okay, and then this is just saying that we can't vary penalties. So we can't say, hey, I don't think it should be two strokes. I think it should be one. We have to apply the penalties as they're in the book. But if you have a wrong application of a penalty or a failure to apply a penalty, it may stand only if it's too late to correct it. So if you, for example, we tell someone, hey, it's a two-stroke penalty when you take relief from a penalty area, and then you correct it after the fact, that's okay. But sometimes there's going to be situations where it's too late to correct. Whereas if the competition's closed, or if I think that's the main one there in that Rule 20.1. I think the other thing too, I should have said this earlier, but you'll see in the rules compared to last year, just the way that they have them defined. Now they used to be dashes and now it's dots, and so it's a slight variance, but it is, they've even changed the way they've laid that out, which it doesn't really make that big of a difference, but it is a slight difference. And then this is just saying that in match play, the player and opponent may agree how to decide a rules issue. So as long as they don't deliberately agree to apply the rules in the wrong way. So if Jim and I are out playing a match and we don't know what to do, and we just say, hey, we're just gonna say it's not a penalty, and we don't know if it's a penalty or not, that's fine. We can make that arrangement out there. We don't need to make a request a ruling. I almost said make a claim. But we don't have to request a ruling. We can just say, hey, we're not sure. It's just not gonna be a penalty, and we're gonna move on. All right, so this section 4 here is really it's the old decision, I think 1.1/4/10 or something like that. But this is again just talking about where we have multiple acts or separate acts and how that's defined. And so in the interpretations book, this is one place that I just think is, although they want us to officiate from the smaller book, I think in this case, personally, for me, it's a lot easier to look through the interpretations on this one because of the fact that it does lay out specific examples where that's what was in the old decision as well. And I think that is a lot easier to understand when you're trying to figure out or apply this rule. because it gives you concrete examples instead of just reading through the rules. Either way will work, but I think just looking at I think I have it on the slide eventually, but 1.3 C2 to 4, or sorry, 1 to 3 are good interpretations to look at. So that's page 30. So basically, this hasn't changed in terms of what it was from before. So again, if a player breaches multiple rules or the same rule multiple times before an intervening event, so that intervening event is either making a stroke or someone saying, "Hey, that's a penalty. You can't do that." At that point, then if they do it again, they're going to get a separate penalty or a second penalty. And so the first one is breaches result from unrelated acts. The player gets a separate penalty for each breach. So an example of where's the example of that one? So again, if you look at the interpretation, that first example is an example of this, where you have the player, they break branches that improve their area of their intended swing. And then they also, let's see, in this player here, they make a stroke and they miss the ball, and then they break more branches. So you have that intervening stroke. I guess that's not a great example of unrelated acts, but that just clarifies that once that stroke is made, or if someone tells you that that's a rule that you've broken, even if you do it again, you're going to get penalized. Whereas if you're in the bunker and you take practice swings and ground your club, if you do it 6 times, you're not going to get 6 penalties unless you hit it and then do it again and then hit the shot, do it again, or someone says, or Tom says, "Hey, that's a penalty. You can't do that," and then you do it again, and you're going to get dinged twice. But if you just do it 6 times in a row and there's no intervening act, just one shot penalty there.
It's the maximum 4.
No.
Oh,
The
there
max,
is no maximum.
there's no max there. So you
Maximum is your stupidity.
You get 3 actually.
The player's
what do you
stupidity.
mean?
3 acts before 3 breaches, different acts before you actually made the correct stroke.
6.
You get 6.
Right. If you did 3 of them, yeah. Mhm. If they were unrelated, yeah,
Unrelated.
yeah.
Okay, so there's no max.
So I'm trying to think of an example. If you were somehow in a bunker and you took a swing, and when you did that, you grounded your club and you broke a branch, I think that would just be a single 2, but I would want to double check that. But I think that it's a single act and multiple.
Did you cover that one too?
No, it's
Here, there are 3 things that break the causation. One is you make a stroke.
Mhm.
2 is if you put a ball in play. Then if you do something on the other side of that, it's a new penalty. And the 3rd is somebody says, "Hey, you can't do that," and you go ahead and do it anyway. Those 3 things break it up so that it's no longer a stream. It's now 2 independent events.
right, what that was
Page 30.
So that's what constitutes multiple acts.
The way I look at it, it's a stream. That's the knife that cuts the stream and starts it flowing again.
Right. All right. So let's see. When
Can't
breaches
hit a ball that's
resulted
moving in a
from-
stream.
from a single act or related act, so the player only gets 1 penalty. But if the acts breach multiple rules involving different penalties, the higher level penalty applies. So in this case, you have the player's single act or related acts breach more than one of the procedural requirements for marking, lifting, cleaning, dropping, replacing or placing a ball where the penalty is 1 stroke, such as both lifting a ball without marking its spot and cleaning the lifted ball when not allowed. The player only gets one stroke penalty here in total. Whereas if you have a situation where the player incorrectly substitutes a ball, and and then from the wrong place, if a player plays a substituted ball when not allowed, and also plays that ball from the wrong place, in breach of Rule 14-7A, the player gets 2 penalty strokes in total. So these are kind of the old like 2 + 1 = 2 or 2 + 2 = 2 scenarios where you're not going to get double penalized in these scenarios. You're kind of allowed to break multiple rules in this situation.
Kyle, I got a question, and unfortunately it goes backwards to 1.3C2
Okay.
under your levels of penalties,
Yes.
where it talks about the 1-stroke penalty. Under B, it says a player takes penalty relief for playing a ball from a different place than where the original ball lies. Is 1 stroke. And yet, contrary to that, in 14-7A says you always get the general penalty for playing from the wrong place.
Yeah, we wondered about that.
I think that in your penalty relief for playing the ball from a different place than where the original ball lies.
Right.
When you're taking relief
Stroke.
from a water hazard or something like pardon penalty or something like that, not wrong place.
Right.
See, there's a
Right.
difference between different place and wrong place.
Yeah.
I'm not
What Gene
understanding
said.
that.
So basically, what she's saying is that this is a player taking relief from a penalty area or taking an unplayable where it's not the wrong place. It's a 1-stroke relief penalty.
In a different place than where the ball was.
Yeah, from where the original ball was. So
What's
so
the
instead
definition
of
of wrong
instead of
place?
playing
Oh.
at the bottom of the
What
lake,
is the
they're
definition?
Wrong place is someplace you're not supposed to be playing from. In this case, he is playing, he's just playing in a different place.
I think what
But
she's
it's
saying,
the correct place.
it costs you a stroke to get out of the penalty area. That's the stroke you're talking about, right? If when you put that ball into play, it's in a wrong place, then you add 2 more.
Yeah, if it's in the wrong place, but in this case, it's just in a different place than where the original ball was.
I mean, here, could we say it this, it's like another way of saying stroke and distance.
kind of.
Necessarily.
I mean, that's one of the options.
No, but that's how the ball comes out with a 1 only
Right.
penalty.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's a.
But then
You
if
can-
you do it in the wrong spot, add 2.
Gene,
Right.
what you're saying is he took his relief in the wrong
That's
place.
wrong.
No, that's a wrong
In
place.
the wrong place. Go back and read 1-3C.
This is closer than I've come to understanding that.
The first bullet point under 2. This penalty applies in both match and stroke play under certain rules where either the advantage from a breach is minor or a player takes penalty relief. He's taking penalty relief, either unplayable or penalty area, by playing a ball from a different place than where the original ball lies. I went in an unplayable line, and I'm now going to take correct relief and play in a different place from where the ball originally lay. Different, but correct.
Yeah.
It's not a wrong place.
It costs you a stroke to do that.
Yeah.
And then if when you're putting your ball in play, it's a wrong place, you add 2 more strokes. This 1 stroke just, yeah, what Jeannie's saying is it costs you,
No, what
I'm not
the,
even talking about.
no, what
wrong
the rule
place.
says is
The
it's only a
person is
1-stroke
playing in the
penalty
right
because it's a
place.
different place.
Yeah.
Different from where the ball came after my first shot.
Right.
Still correct.
the ball was in the penalty
it's just,
area.
It's just the way they have to define when you're taking penalty relief or whatever they call it. I think it's penalty relief, right?
Yeah, it is
Um,
really, really.
So it's just saying that instead of it's by the rules to not play the ball from the bottom of the lake, you can play it from this new place, and it's the correct place, and it's going to be 1 stroke to do that. Whether it's from the penalty area or an unplayable or stroke and distance, it's all those options rolled into 1. So
If it's in the penalty area, it costs you 1 stroke to bring it out. You take 4 club lengths and play that ball. It was 1 stroke to bring it out and 2 more
So
for
that's
playing
in
from the wrong
place.
spot.
No question about that.
That's wrong.
right.
That's not.
No, but the first stroke is because the place of your ball is in the penalty area. costs you a stroke to get it out of the penalty area.
All right, so then here's just a situation where I think we talked about this one, but again, these are just your 1+2 or your combo penalties that are really just going to be equal to 2. And then again, this is what we're kind of just talking about, but this is something you'll see on the test questions if you take the test. Is that they're always going to ask these questions. We saw in the last quiz we took where it's going to ask you how many penalty strokes in total, and you can't forget that penalty for a penalty area or unplayable or whatever, because they're going to say it's 2 penalty strokes because it's 1 for doing this and then 1 for taking relief from penalty area. So don't forget that if you're taking the test, because that's something that's always going to be on there. They're always going to trick people on.
It's like they're playing Simon Says with you.
Yeah.
They get you to move your arm.
Right. And then again, these are those interpretations. I think that's not right. No, that is right. Yep, that's the right numbers. But it's page 30 and 31. I like looking at those because they're good. They have actual examples. So I would recommend reading through that. We won't spend our time, but that's a good one to kind of reference. That will come up. Definitely, if you are taking the test, that this will be covered at some point on the test, and it does happen when we're out there as well. All right. Any questions on Rule 1? We know how to play the game of golf. We know how to initiate it now. So now we're going to move on to the course. So again, the course we have. Very, very similar setup to what it was before. We're going to talk about the areas of the course, and we're going to talk about some objects or conditions that can interfere with play. So as we always say, when we're trying to get a ruling, we need to know what happened, who was involved, where it was in the course. All these things matter when coming to the right conclusion for a ruling. So the out of bounds, straightforward. Don't need to spend, it's just something that's defined by the committee. Now, this diagram that's in the book is a good diagram to just show the 5 parts of the course. So you have these 4 that are listed there, but then the 5th area on the course is the general area. So all the areas except these 4. So we have one there where we're starting to play the hole, the team area, and then bunkers and penalty areas, and then the putting green of the hole being played as the 4th spot. And the 5th part of the course is just that general area. That's everything that's not labeled here on this diagram. And then again, this is just really kind of the definition of or close to a definition of the general area, but it's called the general area because it covers the majority of the course where the player's ball will most often be played until the ball reaches the green. And it includes every type of ground and growing or attached objects, so fairway, rough, trees, all these that aren't part of penalty areas are going to be in this general area.
Did you see that one word, most often? I don't relate to that sometimes.
Yeah.
Where's your three?
Flowers? No, only for another half hour.
All right. So again, this is just talking about the other areas of the course, the non-general areas. There's specific rules that deal with these areas of the course. So you've got your team area, that's rule 6.2, penalty areas is 17, bunkers is 12, and the putting green of the hole the player is playing is in 13. So all these, yeah, go ahead.
On the last one, as with the old rules, the rules do not differentiate between rough and fairway. The rules do not differentiate. So if you're in the rough and you can take relief and your relief puts you in the fairway, you can do that.
Correct. Yeah, there's no distinction saying you can't go from one part of the course to the other.
Specific areas are different, but
Right.
fairway
Right.
and rough are
For
just
the general
general
area, yeah, you can go from any part of the general area to any part of the general area. Unless you're playing the GAM scramble. If you're playing the GAM scramble, you can't go from the
Rough to fairway.
Yeah, from the rough to the fairway. So keep that in mind.
Committee.
All right. The area of the course where the player's ball lies affects the rules that are applying to that ball. So it's always treated as lying in only one area of the course. If it's part of both the general area and one of the other 4 specific areas, then it's going to be that specific area. So if the ball is touching the penalty area line and the general area, it's going to be in the penalty area. Okay, and then this, that's on the screen. That shouldn't be quite away, but this is just saying that if it touches 2 of the specific areas of the course, it's treated as lying in the specific area that comes first in this order. So if it's touching the penalty area and a bunker, it's in the penalty area. If it's touching a bunker and the putting green, it's in the bunker. But again, all those areas are gonna take precedent over the general area. So I think Mark Wilson talked about this, and that the reason they came up with this order was just because of the frequency of these scenarios happening, and that you were more often to have it be in this order. So I don't envision maybe once this year we'll run to a situation where we need to decide if the ball's in the penalty area or penalty area in the bunker could happen. We see a lot of times where we will even paint lines inside of a bunker. So up at Boyne 12 on the Moor, that one we always paint a line in the bunker there, and I'm sure there's others that I'm forgetting, but that one will be at this year. So that could be a situation where the ball could be on that line or in the bunker. We'd have to say since it's touching the line of the penalty area, it's in the penalty area.
Just to keep in mind, though, that you've got a ball line that appears to be in the general area and in the penalty area. Does it have to be touching the line to be in the penalty area? No, it doesn't, because remember the penalty area lines extend upward. So it can be overhanging the line. It'll be considered in part in the penalty area.
That's the only one that it applies to, the only specific area that the horizontal
OB
plane,
extends up and down. Bunkers
but
do
not
not.
bunkers and not plane.
Bunkers do not extend up.
Just OB and penalty areas.
That's in the definition, right?
Should be, yeah. Used to be.
Yes, it is. Out of bounds up and down, penalty areas up and down, everything else down. And I don't know if it's uniformly true under the
Above the ground, yeah.
new
And
rules,
the big definition. of
but a
penalty area.
working way without trying to memorize everything is that a ball is in unless it's all the way out. A ball is inbounds unless it's all the way out.
Right.
Ball is in a bunker unless it's all the way out. Ball is in an abnormal course condition unless it's all the way out.
That's
a rule of thumb.
that's almost right. I mean, the scenario you have is that if the ball is in touching the bunker in the penalty area, then it'd be in the penalty
Yeah.
area. But that would be
Craig, in your example, that would be a ball, stuck in some long grass, overhanging a bunker,
penalty area or bunker.
a penalty area. Yeah.
Yeah, well, wouldn't view the bunker.
No, you're right.
Goes down.
No, the bunker only goes down,
Bunker only-
so it wouldn't be. Or grass that overhangs in penalty area.
Long grass hanging over a rodeo.
But I mean, if we really think about it, because of the changes to the penalty area, there's not really a ton of difference now because they can ground their club, they can remove the impediments, and take practice swings. So really, I think that distinction is not as big of a deal. I mean, there's still, I guess a player could in theory take relief, but
Why?
But
And that would be the
But
question, why?
Why would they? Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
why
I
would
mean,
they? Because
maybe
you can,
maybe it's a
pretty much play
bad
it.
bad spot. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or you know,
Well,
who
here-
knows?
I mean, you may not be
Maybe
able
they
to.
don't have a
You may
stance.
not be able to play
Yeah,
it,
maybe
but,
they don't
yeah.
have a stance.
all courses now that have these big areas of heather, if they mark those as penalty areas, you have the option of bringing your ball out under one stroke penalty. Otherwise, you're just in there whacking away
for
trying to
Yeah.
get the heather off your club.
Even if they don't mark them, but it's listed in the clubhouse that it's a penalty area, you have to play it as such.
Right.
It doesn't have to be marked, I mean, right? Penalty areas don't have to be marked.
Correct. They need to be.
I know,
They need to be defined.
we
So they
actually, we always mark.
That's,
Yeah.
No, I said, if you look in there, we've got some local rules, but it's with regards to the rock wall on 18 and the play on 17. But
notice that he's
rock
trying
wall
to
was
run.
always played as an integral part of the course, and then we stopped that and said, okay, it's because the rocks are there and the flower beds are there, treated like a flower bed, like all the other flower beds on the course. So you have to take relief from the flower beds. So, yeah, that's listed in the clubhouse and it's on the scorecard.
But if it's not marked, it really make a difference.
it says it should be defined by stakes, lines, or physical features.
Right.
Doesn't
Yeah,
say it
doesn't
has
say
to be.
must. And then actually, there's actually some verbiage in there somewhere that says, if it's not marked, but it's listed, it has to be treated as such. I've forgotten exactly where I read that.
Right. But it'd be the same thing if you go to a course, you're playing a tournament. We've had this happen before. We get out there and we missed a hazard, or there was a part of the course that we didn't know about, and someone hits it in there and it's water, and so we give them relief, and then we mark it after the fact. And
Yeah.
It's kind of that situation where if it does meet the definition of what is a water hazard, or was a water hazard, now the penalty area, then you would get relief.
Even a drainage ditch,
Right.
even if there's no water in the little drainage area,
Right.
Lake Forest has got 2 or 3 of those, especially one.
Right.
9 and 18.
Yep. All right. Yeah.
Did you notice that both the penalty area and the OB say that the margin extends up and down? But bunker and ground under repair no longer even address it in the definition. They don't say they extend downwards. And I know there's a lot of stuff in there about tree roots and extending out and all that. kind of
Right.
stuff, But they, in the definition, they don't say that.
It doesn't.
And there's nothing there about up or down in the bunker.
They're not in the bunker or underground under repair.
Well, it could be. I mean, I'm just guessing here, but I mean, for a bunker, it could be now because a lot of that, because now the wall and the lips aren't part of the bunker.
Where the hell's where USA
I'm surprised it's not in the ground under repair because it's in the ground under repair. Stick out over, also roots that come out past the line, underground.
Well, yeah, they say no to roots, but for example, if there was a rabbit hole
There's
where the hole was on the course, the tunnel went under the ground under repair. If the ball's in there, is it in the abnormal ground condition? Without the definition of it going down.
Well,
Good question.
there's a in the big book, there's an interpretation about that, and the definition of ground under repair, ball and a tree rooted in ground under repair is in ground under repair. So
So the whole
It's-
tree is, if any branches.
So the whole tree is,
Beyond.
and any
Still
branches
right
that
under.
are overhanging.
If a tree
Right.
interferes with your swing,
right,
you get a tree rooted in the ground.
right,
I don't think anything has changed, it's just that.
Yeah.
right. It's not in there. Right. All right, there's a change coming apparently. So certain rules you have free relief, and you have be defined by or interference from certain defined objects or conditions. loose impediments, movable obstructions, abnormal course conditions, which are animal holes, ground under repair, and movable obstructions in temporary water. And so now they're throwing in movable obstructions under the definition of abnormal course conditions. It's not going to treat or change how we apply the relief procedure, but it is different than in the past, whereas that the abnormal ground conditions previously did not include immovable obstructions. And then this is just saying that, as we know, has always been the case, if we have integral objects, formerly known as integral parts of the course, that there's no free relief from those, or from boundary objects, OB fences, things of that nature. And we don't see a ton of integral parts of the course, and the only one I could really think of off the top of my head was at Polo Field, but I guess those rocks on 18 are not an integral part of the course anymore.
They were originally, and we redefined that last year
Okay.
because of complaints
Right.
about all the flower beds that were in there, and you should be able to play from a flower bed as you couldn't play from the flower beds anywhere else on the course. So
Right.
we just decided that we were going to change the definition of that area.
Radrick Farms at least used to have railroad ties in the bunker, like spokes of a wheel.
Okay. I don't know if they're still there, but
I mean, long time ago.
Along the road, along 9 Mile. There's the at Plum Hollow, there's one road along 9 Mile.
oh yeah, the
Cart path.
cart path.
Is in part of the course.
Yeah, number 4.
Mm-hmm. Up by the green there.
Yeah. You can define that, or you could just leave it as it is, and if you want to take relief, take it up against the fence type thing.
You got railroad ties in the bunkers there, Radrick too.
Okay. All right, so here's the definition of an abnormal course condition. Again, it's just any of these 4 defined areas. However, there used to be the burrowing animal hole, and again, it actually defines in the book what an animal is, and the start of the definition is any living member of the animal kingdom other than humans. So there is that clarification if you need to know that, but they do get down to that detail, and for good reason too, because it's if you think about it, if they didn't say that, then what would a divot be? It'd be an animal hole, right? So they have to clarify that to keep everyone happy and make Jack Nicklaus mad. Who's going to be at Oakland Hills? I'm sure some of you saw that on our website, but he did announce that yesterday. So Jack is going to be part of the celebration for the centennial and the fundraiser for the GAM Foundation, which is pretty cool.
Kyle, on the animal hole, though, they have added 3 things.
Right.
It includes the loose material that the animals dug out.
Yeah.
It includes if the little animal has made a trail going in, and objects above the ground, which I presume means something like a mole.
Always include the cast.
Have they?
Yeah, always include it. They call it a cast.
Well,
Yeah.
some call it a spear, some call it an arrow.
But hoof prints or big animal prints, like in a bunker, there's no.
Not in the bunker or anywhere. On the green you can, but everywhere else you wouldn't. Well,
some of those,
I don't know. I mean,
sometimes those geese make a mess in there.
If you end up in a
Loose
yeah, I guess what's the definition of a hole? Is
loose
it,
impediment
I'd
or
have to-
dude,
we'd have to
look it up
at
under
that.
whichever
Is it-
definition.
They're in here.
Is it in there? Oh, I said, sorry, yes, but I don't know. I'm gonna write that down because that is something. I mean,
I was thinking of the old days when I played Elk Ridge, and the elk were running all over the course. And
they'd be all over the greens.
The greens and the bunkers.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, so Tony had a good point there. In the definition, it says it has to be dug by the animal. So a footprint or a hoof print would not be that. But on the green, it is something you could fix.
What about a deer scrape when they're in the rut? Have you ever seen a deer scrape?
No.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I
I have them
haven't.
in my backyard, but they'll get in a bunker or something and leave their scent, and they'll dig a half a hole.
Well, if they dig a hole, then you'd
Yeah,
be
they
fine.
dig. I mean, they're
They're
like
just
this.
rooting in there.
Yeah, you'd be fine in that case if it was a hole that was dug.
I don't see it.
We'll call you over to determine if it's a root.
Yeah, if we need.
If they're in season or not.
What season is
I'm
it?
not going there. Never mind.
Made after your ball, they go to the rest of your.
A hoof print?
Yeah,
You're
because
entitled to the
you're
line
entitled to the
that
line.
When your ball comes fresh.
Right.
We're talking about.
Yeah, last time.
He was talking about you.
I'll work on it.
You can add some risers to your shoes.
You don't leave your scent, do you? Some places.
I do that. I know I do that.
You don't want to know. TMI.
All right. And then again, this word integral object
It hasn't worked.
is essentially just the old integral part of the course, but it's something that's defined by the committee as part of the challenge of playing the course, from which free relief is not allowed. They're treated as immovable, but if part of the integral object, so like a gate or a door or part of an attached cable, meets the definition of a movable obstruction, that part is treated as a movable obstruction. So no change here in the definition, just the change in the word from integral part of the course to integral object. And artificial objects defined by the committee as integral objects are not obstructions or boundary objects. All right, so
Hey, Kyle.
yeah,
How about if you played a place where they have an out of bounds, it's got a fence, but by the fence, they also have cables coming down from poles, and the cables are on the golf course. And your ball's against the fence, so you don't get relief from the fence because of the boundary, but you can't make a swing because of the cable. What happens there?
so
You get relief.
Yeah, no, it would be
if
a
it's-
stroke you
I mean,
wouldn't
you just-
ordinarily make, so no
you
relief.
just get relief. No,
That's why
well,
the swing-
I mean, you're not taking relief from the fence in that case. You're taking relief because your swing is interfered by the cables. So if it happened to get relief away from the fence because of that, then you'd be fine. But you're not taking relief from the fence per se. You're taking relief from the cables, but they can also define the cables as being, integral or right. So
Or if it's currently impractical for him to make his swing, then he doesn't get relief from unmovable obstruction.
right, if you had to turn around and hit left-handed to make that happen, and there was no way you'd hit a left-handed shot, if that wasn't there, then yeah. Yep. All right, so no play zone. So this is just a further clarification of what it is, but it is going to impact how we run our competitions, because we have been doing this under a different name for ever since I've been here, at least, and I'm sure even longer. But really, the no play zone is either part of an abnormal course condition, so typically ground under repair, or a penalty area, or it's in a penalty area. And it's a place where you cannot play from. So you must take relief when it's either your ball is in that area, or if it's interference from your stance, your swing, or your lie of your stance, your swing, and then again your ball. So even if your ball is outside of it, if you're standing in this area, whether it be a flower bed or an environmentally sensitive area, as an example, you would have to take relief from this. And so to kind of get to the question that was asked earlier, the difference between a normal ground under repair and a no play zone is that in a no play zone you have to take relief. And so these are unique areas that we'll be marking, and we haven't decided exactly how we're going to do it, but typically, Craig, in the past, we've said the flower bed is mandatory relief, mandatory GUR. Well, we're gonna call it. That's going to be a situation where it's going to be a no play zone, but we haven't determined how we're going to identify. I know we talked about it in the last meeting, how we're going to identify, but that's something that we need to figure out.
Yeah, it indicates that the committee should mark those areas of no play zone. So instead of just stating on our local rules that flower beds are mandatory GUR, that we'll probably have to come up with some different color stake and actually stake those areas that are flower beds. I would think we would do that.
And put it in the starter's instructions.
You don't want to make them penalty zone, because then if the ball is outside. Weed growing up in the penalty area, that's a penalty.
Not anymore.
Can barely hear the comments.
But if you make them penalty areas, this little sentence right here, where you are, you can't interfere if the ball is outside and it interferes with the swing, now you violated the rules. So
Right.
you don't want to make them penalty, make them GUR.
Sorry, was there a comment?
Yes, could barely hear the comments in the background. Can
Okay,
hear you,
so what the discussion was is that we we're for these flower beds, we want to make sure that we define these flower beds as no play zones as part of an abnormal course condition and not part of the penalty area.
So if a area of the course is marked, say with white around a ground under repair, then that's considered a no play zone?
No, so you can still have the question was for people here. I for some reason I can't get it to play louder on my computer, but the question was if you have is there a distinction between white circle ground under repair and no play zone, and the answer is yes. You can have both. You can have ground under repair in the middle of the fairway where the player can play from there if they want, but the difference for the no play zone is that they cannot play from this area. I mean, they can, but they'll get a penalty if they do it.
What's the penalty?
It's
General
a two-stroke general penalty. Yeah. So that's the distinction. So, and that's what Craig was referencing is that we have to figure out how we're going to define these areas so that a player does know the difference between just a normal ground under repair and a place where you have to take relief, this no play zone. So it could be. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Mark.
You said there's a two-stroke penalty if they play from a ground under repair?
No, if they play from a no play zone, there's a two-stroke penalty. So it's kind of the same penalty. Whereas if a player plays from a wrong green, they're going to get a two-stroke penalty to do that. But ground under repair, if they play from there, there's no penalty. They're allowed to, but no play zone. If you play from a no play zone, it's a two-stroke penalty.
Kyle, if the no play zone is in a penalty area, do you get free relief?
No.
Yeah, same situation.
No
we had
play
last
zone,
year.
but not the penalty area.
After it says
Yeah, if
on
it's
page 150.
if it stands.
If it stands or
Stance or swing, you get
still have
relief.
to drop it in the
Free
penalty
relief.
area. Free relief.
Yeah.
In the penalty area.
Right.
Kyle,
Uh,
2G
Answer swing.
under committee procedures,
No play zone in a penalty.
page 391,
In the penalty area.
Stay in there.
Gotta stay in the penalty area.
red stake, green top.
Last year, under our local rules, we required that if a ball were within a flower bed within a penalty area, it was required that you take a one-stroke penalty to take the lead.
That's because there wasn't
Oh, yeah.
It's a penalty area.
You say
Take it out of the repair.
Tony said you drop a penalty.
Yes.
No, you get the drop out of the.
But we
play zone
required-
into the penalty
You're
area.
required.
You required to take the one-stroke penalty outside the penalty.
Fine.
Page 391,
There we go. Wait. So what? Sorry.
150, 17, free relief. So it's just for stance or swing in a penalty area. Free relief, but dropping the original in the relief area. But still.
Yeah, number one. You must take penalty. No.
Yeah, no. So if there's a flower bed surrounded by general area and it's a no play zone, then it's an abnormal ground condition, right? So you'd get free relief.
Midland's got a flower bed within a penalty area in one of their par threes. And I think it looks to me like it still must take penalty relief under 17-1D or 17-2.
Yeah.
It says, under Rule 14.3, if a relief area exists within the penalty area, you can use that. Second bullet, 17, 1E, number 2, page 150.
So are they suggesting we create a drop zone there?
Well, you'd have to, I think what it's saying is.
I think what it's saying.
Relief from the stance and swing.
I think-
For the no play zone.
I think
But
it's
still.
I think it's talking about two separate things. I think it's talking about a penalty area and a no play zone. And that if your stance is in the no play zone, which is separate of this other penalty area, you could take free relief inside the penalty area. But if the penalty area is defined as a no play zone, that part of it you still have to take relief. So if it's an environmentally sensitive area that we define as a no play zone, if your stance is in there, you have to take you have to take relief.
You have to come out of the no play zone regardless. Or take the two-stroke penalty.
Yeah. And then you're in the penalty area. So then you've got your choices if there were no play zone there, if that's not too many negatives.
Right. I think what they're saying.
Then you're just under then you're just under the penalty area.
If the ball's in the no play zone that's inside a penalty area, it's telling you you have to take penalty relief.
So it's saying that
If your stance or your swing is
Right.
gonna have touched that no play zone, but the ball isn't in it, but in the penalty area, you can take a drop in the penalty area for no strokes, or you can take penalty relief.
Under the penalty relief rule, right?
I think we're overthinking,
Yeah.
like we do a lot.
Really?
You said you have to take that out. Is that what you were talking about?
No, you
Kyle, have you looked at committee procedures?
Correct.
The ball's out.
Dan, what page are you referencing?
391 in the big book. How to mark a no play zone.
Right. Yeah, so I think we're getting to that point, and I guess just for my own clarification. So, but if a ball is in a no play zone, the player needs to take relief. If they don't, they're going to get a penalty.
The general penalty.
Correct. So I think the one situation is just saying that if it's two separate areas, there's a no play zone and a penalty area that are separate. But anytime your ball is in a no play zone, you don't. I hate saying have to, because you can actually play from there and you just get a two-stroke penalty. But if it's in that no play zone, in order to not get a penalty, you have to take it out. In some cases, it's going to be free relief if it's an abnormal ground condition, abnormal course condition. But if it's penalty area, you're forced to take penalty relief. So, let's see here if I can get this to start in the right place. So when you're marking these no play zones, typically if it's a penalty area, you're going to have stakes with different colored tips. So the ones that I've seen have all been green. And I think there is a course here in Michigan that had those green stakes, but I can't remember what it was off the top of my head. But I've seen them other places as well. But typically it's just a red stake. You have a red stake or a yellow stake with green tips on it. And that's just to identify to the players that this is used to be an environmentally sensitive area. Now it's going to be a no play zone that's defined as a penalty area. Stonehenge, do they have those?
Stonehenge, yeah.
Mhm. Okay.
We have a big stand with a snake on it. Nobody was in there.
North Course has got all
Really
those
did.
damn things from Michigan State University is out there with all the migratory fishermen. They mark those
Right.
places.
And so then, for us as a rules committee, we're working on how we're going to define these mandatory, we used to call them mandatory GUR, how we're going to define them. If we're going to, maybe we just limit the amount of times where we're going to do this, as we just did that as a courtesy without, thinking, hey, this flower bed is really never going to come into play, but then you have one that's you think is out of play and then it comes into play. So I think there's going to have to be more discussion from our staff end with the course and the superintendent to ask him or her or whoever's in charge at the club to say, do you care if people play from your flower beds? And chances are, depending on the level of the event, they may or may not care. I mean, look at Augusta on the 13th hole there. I mean, I know that was the first time I remember watching that tournament was when Greg Norman went up in that and was hacking from the flowers and the bushes back there. So you have situations like that where it just might be easier just to not make it a no play zone. Huh? 12, sorry. 12, the par three. Sorry, 12. I thought.
13 is going to say.
Yeah. No. Yeah. So I think that's something that we're working towards, and whether it's a different color stake or something to identify those areas, it's important that we do that.
Just a sign that says danger, snake breeding zone.
Yeah. That'll scare most people, but not everyone.
Until the third or fourth time they see it.
Right.
Some little mechanical rattlers. You walk through that, yes, and you rattle.
Do it with a remote control. I mean, that'd really be fun.
All right, and so here's just a few examples. This is the definition of the no play zone, but this is just a few examples of areas that we might define as no play zones. So wildlife, animal habitats, environmentally sensitive areas, areas where damage to young trees or flower beds, turf nurseries. These are things that we've traditionally marked as a mandatory GUR. And then protecting players from danger could be an area with snakes or something like that, or preserving sites of historical or cultural interest. So there was a course I was at in Nebraska, and on one of the holes they had it was an old cemetery, Indian burial ground, and they had that marked as don't go there, mandatory GUR. And so that's that could be now a no play zone.
Kyle, what about there was a few courses this year where they had the orange stakes out, and that was defined as no play zones, basically, wasn't it? I mean, Edgewood and
Environmentally sensitive area.
right, but they just didn't want you in there like around the
Detroit Golf Club had that. That's more probably the correct way for that is probably an immovable obstruction. Is how you would want to really define that. But Edgewood has it with their maintenance shed as well. It's just it's an addition, or it's a way to give players relief without marking it out of bounds. So it's a friendly way to. I mean, personally, I think it probably is. It should be marked out of bounds, but Forest Lake is another example where it's really kind of right there, and in that case, you just give them relief under immovable obstruction. But that's really what those kind of areas are. You see those orange stakes, but so I don't know if we would say. I mean, we can definitely say that those would be. I guess now with the new, maybe that's the reason why they're including immovable obstructions in abnormal course condition definition. That's actually a really good example of one where you can now call it a no play zone without. Yeah, that's probably the reason why. So good job discovering that. That's kudos.
So the relief is the nearest point of relief?
Complete relief. Nearest point of complete
relief.
Right. For that situation.
For a flower bed or no place.
Correct, yes. Yeah, it's going to be whatever you're calling it. So if you're defining it as an abnormal course condition, it's going to be nearest point of complete relief. But if it's penalty area, the relief's going to be a penalty area relief.
But back to our overthinking. So if this area, the tables, is a no play zone, okay, and my ball is here, I can't take it over there. I'm going to take complete relief here, right?
Nearest point.
Right,
Point.
right.
The same thing. Now it's inside this room is a penalty area,
Right.
and my ball is here.
Still,
I'm in the no play zone. The room is a
It's different.
Is a
It's
penalty
different. So
area.
then you're going to go back to where you last crossed.
No. His first action is to drop the ball at the nearest point of relief.
No.
Yes, and then from there you decide.
You can't play from a no play zone. So
I'm not going to play.
He's saying the table is a no play zone.
And the room
is a penalty area.
My ball is here.
He's taking relief for the no play zone into the penalty area.
Computers in the no play.
Yes.
Yes. It's the nearest point.
Here. Pretend this table is a pond, a shallow pond, marked as a no play zone. His ball is right there.
Exactly.
He's saying the room is the penalty area. Step one, you should take
So what? No, I don't think that's right. And so here's my counter to you. And I don't know if it's right or not, but it'd be the same thing. If you have a penalty area, can you mark a part of the penalty area as ground under repair? You can't, right? So why are you?
Wait a minute.
No, this says any reason.
You can have a no play zone within a
Penalty area.
You can define a penalty area as a no play zone, not the other way around.
No. You can define a no play zone within a penalty area.
Where?
Here, right at the second sentence at the top. Must be defined as part of either. So it's either going to be
part of, yep.
Either a part of an abnormal course condition or it's going to be part of a penalty area. I mean, to me, then it all makes sense.
Okay. So you're saying that this subset of the thing is a no play zone, and then outside of it, so where you're sitting is a penalty area.
Right. The room.
Right.
So the table's inside the room, which is the penalty area.
Yeah.
The table is a no play zone.
Right.
Page 150. 17-1E1. We just talked about this.
Yeah.
It says when a ball is in a no play zone in a penalty area, the player must take penalty relief under Rule 17-1D or 17-2.
I wasn't arguing that. I was just wanting to make sure I understood.
Penalty relief means penalty relief.
No. Let me finish.
Penalty.
I'm just wanting to define that if my ball is here, it's the nearest point of complete relief. I can't. If it's inside the penalty area, I can't walk over there where there's land as opposed to here where there's water. Okay, so right?
Yeah.
It's the nearest point of relief.
Nearest point of relief. So
Outside the penalty area.
No.
It's outside.
Now,
Outside of the no play zone.
They're talking about, so
When a ball is in a no play zone in a penalty area,
Player must
take penalty relief.
right.
Under,
So you don't get any free drop.
No, there are two alternatives here.
No, that number 2, it says when a player is in a no play zone and of course interferes with a stance or swing for a ball in penalty area. It's not, the ball's not in the,
You don't get
the
an
ball
option
is
of
not in the
dropping
no
in the
play
penalty
zone. The
area.
ball's just in the penalty area.
Take full relief. They're outside the penalty area.
What page are you on?
150,
The small book.
150, small book. Item 2, 17-1E2.
So the ball's not in the no play zone, it's just in the penalty area, but the no play zone interferes with his stance or swing. That's when you get the free relief.
In the penalty
In the
area.
penalty area.
Otherwise, if you're taking penalty relief, you forget about nearest complete, you go back to the point where it crosses the
That's
line,
crossed.
because that's
Yeah.
normal penalty relief, right?
Right.
I mean, there will never be, I shouldn't say never, but there should never be a situation where you would define part of a penalty area as a no play zone and other part not. You would just make the entire thing. So I've never.
Flower beds in a penalty area are gonna be no play zones, right? Midland's got a flower bed and a penalty area.
Who does?
Midland.
So does Downey.
Downey.
Downey,
has
yeah,
a-
Yeah, no, and I mean,
flower bed
again,
inside of what-
all the courses that have heather now, you could have an acre of heather and you could have plants that need to be protected that are the size of this table. So you'd be putting a no play zone inside a much bigger area that you've decided to call a penalty area.
Just lead- Even if your ball lay where your chair is and your backswing, get something, the flowers.
Right.
You would have to take your free relief there, take complete relief from that.
Right.
And then if you wanted to take a penalty, one stroke,
Right.
you could then get out of the.
That's what we're arguing.
Right.
That's exactly.
You're
the
saying
way
it's
it
You're
is.
saying the ball lies in
circle.
But your ball lies in the no play zone within the penalty area.
Correct.
The room's the penalty area, right?
Room's the penalty area. This is a no play zone, the table.
You're not entitled to free relief in that case.
No.
There you are, you're entitled to free relief from that.
Where does,
no play zone.
where does it say that? Where does it say that? I don't.
Jeannie says it's.
When a ball is in a no play zone in a penalty area, the player must take penalty relief under Rule 17.1G or 17.2.
To me, it's the next sentence.
Those are two different
Those are
situations.
different situations. That's not one either or. It's
Those, yeah,
it's a
two
different situation.
independent
Ball is not in
situations.
the no play zone.
Well, that's a good point.
Yes, it is.
Because in Lee's example, it's in the no play zone, but it's in the penalty area. You've got to take it out. You've got to take it out completely. You don't have a choice. You don't get to drop it first and then pull it out. You got to take it completely out. So you can take it over there. In fact, you have to take it over there. You must take it over there.
Well, that's where I last crossed.
Or,
Yeah.
Or stroke and distance.
yeah, stroke and distance or whatever. The ball's in a no play zone in a penalty area. So when it's on the table in the room, the player must take penalty relief.
Yeah, outside.
That's what it says. So this whole discussion has been about nothing.
Well, no, it's been about reaching this point.
No, about reaching an understanding of what.
So let's just use the situation that Yanni, like you said, that I think a lot of people here have been there. How should we mark that?
Mark a no play zone within the penalty area. With different color stakes or something. I'm sure they're not gonna want us playing their flower beds. We can ask the superintendent, but they're not gonna want us to, the players will be hacking it up in there, right?
Mark the whole thing in no place.
Yeah, you make the whole thing.
I mean, that's the easiest way, but then that could be over. Yeah, I mean exactly.
I guess you are giving more relief.
Yeah, it's free relief.
Well, there's always more that meets the eye to this, but it's something I think we need to for that course specifically to think about, because I mean, you in my mind you would probably want to make it as easy as possible for people to understand, but you also don't want to.
Hopefully it
doesn't happen.
I mean, it's really out of
free
play.
relief.
So
There is no free relief from interference by the no play zone. No, this is at the bottom. Maybe- No, that's right. The second option when it was stance or swing. Well, but there's also no free relief under one, so.
Correct.
So there is no free relief.
Oh, yeah, you're still in penalty.
all right, well we'll cross that bridge when we get there, I guess. I'm telling Ken I'm not working Downey. I'm putting for pay time off that day. Okay, and this is just saying again what Dan was talking about earlier in terms of how the stakes are, or how we define these areas. But again, we should identify the no play zone as different from a regular abnormal course condition or penalty area that does not contain a no play zone. So typically that's done with either tips on the stake on the stakes, or a different colored stake that people aren't used to seeing. So a blue stake or something different. All right, rule 3, we'll get through as somewhat of this as we can before we finish here in the next 15 minutes. So rule 3 is really, most of it is fairly straightforward. It talks about either match play or stroke play, and then whether we're playing as an individual or as a team or as or with the side. And then what the scoring, how that works in terms of gross competitions and how that works with net competitions. So the form of play, we know that match play and stroke play are very different, and it's recommended to not mix the two. However, there's a recommendation in the committee procedures on if you do mix them. But most of the rules that we'll talk about will apply in both cases. We have a scenario where it's a penalty, it's X penalty in stroke play and Y penalty in match play, and sometimes it's a one-stroke penalty in both. A lot of them are that way. And again, if you are going to do a competition that combines two forms, then there's a recommendation or considerations on how to do that. Page 4. And then we do have those other forms of stroke play that used to be in the last couple rules in the book, or the older book. We're going to talk about those: maximum score, par and bogey, Stableford, those in Rule 21. And then for team competitions in Rule 24. And then partner competitions in Rules 22 and 23. We'll get to that later. It's just the rules. Now we've got here, obviously, I think pretty much everyone here in this room knows the difference between a scratch competition and a handicap competition and how that's calculated. I think it's interesting they say here under handicap competitions, it's going to set players of different abilities can compete in a fair way. I think they should really just come out and be honest and say they can gamble in a fair way, because that's what the handicap system's for.
There's no gambling at golf courses. What are you talking about?
There's no gambling at Bushwood. So match play. Again, match play is what we know it as, what it always has been. It's two people or a team competing against another team, or a player competing against another player, and that each player can see what's going on and can protect their own interest. So the player wins a hole in fewer strokes, or if it's conceded, or if the opponent gets a loss of hole penalty. And then here's a case where we have, if the opponent's ball in motion needs to be holed to tie the hole, and the ball is deliberately deflected or stopped by any person at a time when there is no reasonable chance it can be holed, such as when the ball is rolled past the hole and will not roll back there, the result of the hole has been decided and the player wins the hole. And then this exception in Rule 111.2a is just talking about exactly that, where I've got to putt for par to have the hole, or to tie the hole, and I hit it past the hole, and Frank just picks it up as it's moving. That's okay. It doesn't impact, because my ball wasn't going to defy gravity and turn around and go in the hole. And so so previously when we talked about match play, it was always have, and now there's still that word in the book, but they also use the word tied. And so probably it's a lot of translation issues, I would imagine. But Craig and I were talking about what we're going to do for our events in terms of, not only talk on the radios, because about the match is halved or the hole is halved, but whether we say tied, but also how we display it on the website as well, because typically it's it's halved or whatever is what we say. So we're just going to wait to see what the USGA does and just copy them. I think that's my recommendation. But so now you can say the word tied and people won't look down on you for not knowing the rules.
So we're postponing all championships until after the US Amateur in August? Or
No, they'll have the Curtis Cup, I think.
Wasn't it Mick who didn't like all that?
Well, he wasn't a fan of Dormy.
Yeah.
But I think that's still in there. But you can So again, these are straightforward. Extending, so here's extending a tied match. The matches extend one hole at a time until there is a winner. And then an extended match is a continuation of the same round, not a new round. And this is the same as it's always been, but it's just a little bit clearer here that it's a continuation of that round and not a new round as it is in stroke play. And the holes in an extended match should be played in the same order as they were in the round, unless the committee sets a different order. So for our match play events, we typically always ahead of time say where the match is going to continue on if it is an event where we have that continuation. And you know, there's always the flexibility for the committee to pull an audible, and if the first tee is full and we need to send people off the back, we can, but it's not really recommended to do that. So obviously for the Michigan Amateur, we would never say one thing and do another, but for another match play event where we have to be more cognizant of the play on the course after we're done, we may need to switch that. But we'll always try to communicate that to the players as early as possible. And then we can always say that instead of there being continuing on the match, we can just call it a draw. And that's, you know, typical what you see in the Solheim or the Ryder Cups, or what we do in our Atlas matches, where we continue, or we just call the matches halved. And then when the result is final, the result of the match becomes final in the way that's stated by the committee, which should be set in the terms of competition. So a couple examples: when the result is recorded on an official scoreboard or other identified place, or when the result is reported to a person identified by the committee. And there's some recommendations on page 404 on how to do that. And so a lot of times, I think I don't know if Craig, and this is maybe something for you to read in our hard card, but, or even our notice. I don't know if we have this on a lot of them. So it might be something to consider.
Please do that, Craig.
About when the competition's closed. I feel like maybe we do, but I don't know if it's always on
I think
there.
there's something in there somewhere, isn't there?
I feel like it's on one of those things, but
Yeah,
we should
probably
probably just.
competition when the individuals.
It's typically like after. I guess maybe we do have it on there. It's like after the prize or after the award ceremony. But I was thinking about it yesterday.
Usually it's in the scoring area when official in charge announces that competition's officially closed.
Right.
It's all supposed to be recorded.
Right. Okay. So concessions. So this really there's a one slight change to this, but the majority of what we understand with concessions is going to continue on. So the player, you can concede the opponent's next stroke, a hole, or the match. And so if you're conceding the next stroke, it's allowed any time before the opponent's next stroke is made. So this is a slight change. Whereas previously you had to do it. You couldn't concede a stroke while the ball was in motion. Now you can. So after I hit a putt, Mike could say, hey, that stroke's good, or that next stroke is good while my putt's still rolling. Or if I blasted it by because I had to make it to whatever, Mike could just say that that putt's good when it's rolling by the hole. But it applies to the next one. However, if your ball goes in the hole, then it's going to be holed. So you can't play a match against someone and have them hit a putt, and then before it goes, it's going dead center, and you say, "Oh, that's good." Before it goes in there, it's still that first putt was good. And then the player may concede the opponent's next stroke by deflecting or stopping the opponent's ball in motion, and only if that is done specifically to concede the next stroke, and only when there's no reasonable chance that the ball can be holed. So again, you can't, when it's going dead set for the center, and go up and grab it and knock it out of the way and say, "Oh, it's good." We got an issue if you do that. But if it's beyond the hole, you can stop it and throw it back to them and say, that's good. And then for the hole can be conceded anytime before the hole is completed, including before the players start the hole. And then conceding the match can be done anytime before the result of the match is decided. And it can be and we can do you can actually do that before the players start the match. And so one question, and maybe we'll end on this because we're getting close, but just as we had a situation happen last year at the girls junior where a player entered the match play portion of the event, knowing that she wasn't going to be able to continue on at some point of the competition. And so is that something that we as a organization or rules committee want to encourage the players to say, if you can't be there for the entire tournament, please withdraw prior to the match play starting, so that other people can get in, with the understanding that for some events, exemptions are on the line, or ranking points and things of that nature. And so is it, using this one player as example in the girls junior, if she bows out of match play, she doesn't qualify for some exemptions or some things for other events, but even though, I mean, does she have the right to play the first 2 rounds even though she knows she's not going to be there for the last couple? And I just throw that out there as to if anyone has thoughts on that, because I think we should have I don't want to say a standard policy, but we should have a sense of direction of how we want to handle these situations, because it could happen. And I mean,
would she get points if she plays the first 2 rounds, or do you get points if you complete the whole? Until you lose.
Well, it just I mean, in juniors is a little bit different because it's also, you know, from a recruiting perspective as well, right? I mean, you want your name to be on that list. So yeah, as you advance on, you get more AJGA stars is what is the specific example. But is it really fair to that player that that they're going to play? If the player wins, then in the semifinals it's just a concession, and it's a fake match. And that's essentially what happened. I think it was the semifinals or the quarterfinals where the player knew she wasn't going to be able to play the next day, and so the person that was playing her was like, well, this is not fun.
But she got not fun because she was going to go to the.
She was going to advance automatically.
That wasn't fun for her?
Yeah.
Needs a little adjustment, personality adjustment.
For the player, win and then concede.
You could, yeah, you could.
So she'd be out of.
Right.
That would be worse.
Right, exactly. And I mean, yeah, I mean that's what you wouldn't want to happen. You wouldn't want to say, oh, I won the match, and then after, you know, I'm not going to be there, and then there's nothing, right? So and that's kind of a secondary question to that is, at what point in time, if you know you're not going to be there, do you have to concede that next match, or yeah?
But there's no guarantee to go to the first match.
Right, exactly. And so, like, I mean, if I'll be honest, if it's me and I'm thinking, I mean, I'm just going to play, and I get to the point where I know I can't play the next round, then I'll concede. But I want to compete until I know I can't anymore.
We could give them like an extra quarter point for each level.
Yeah, well, and
then, you know,
is,
then a 10 3/4 would be to 10 1/4.
Right. Well, but you know, some of the things that they earn are outside of what we do. So, but anyways, so next week we'll continue on Rule 3, and then we'll get to 4, and then 5 and 6. Hopefully, hopefully we won't spend a ton of time on 4, because that's another rule that I suck at. So we're just going to stick to that one really quick. But also I think that Rule 4 is there's really, I think they made it easier to understand, and we just don't want to get bogged down into all the crazy what ifs with clubs and things happening. So we'll get through that and hopefully get through 5 and 6 next week. Other thing before everyone goes, I should have mentioned this at the beginning, but next week Carrier and Gable has a commitment during our normal time. So I don't know if we're going to be able to do it on Wednesday. We might possibly be able to do it later in the day, but if we can't do it on a Wednesday, is there a preference of a Tuesday or a Thursday?
Thursday.
For the people in the room and on the call.
I got whatever. They can eat without me.
I can't do it Tuesday.
Okay, so Thursday
would work.
Either one.
Thursday. Thursday is the one that's been most common. So okay, I'll send out something ASAP on that to confirm. But let's tentatively plan next week to be on the Thursday and not the normal Wednesday.
Can I make that announcement?
Assuming that this is available. It's all based. Unfortunately, we don't have